looks like we are live streaming now on YouTube there, Mr. Chair. So we're good to go.
Sounds good. Thank you. We'll call the Board of Directors meeting of Thursday, October 28th, 2021 to order then. It's 1 o'clock, 1:01. Can I get a motion, please, for the adoption of the agenda? Moved by Director Windover, second by Director Hooper. Anyone opposed to that? We'll consider that passed. Thank you. Any declaration of pecuniary interest on anything on today's agenda? All right. No. If anything should arise, let us know. Approval of the minutes for the Board of Directors meeting last month, September 23rd. I need a motion to receive and adopt, please. Director Dunn, thank you. Second by Director Hooper will second that. Thank you. Anyone opposed? Questions on the minutes? Submissions? Anyone opposed to adopting the minutes? Consider those passed. Thank you. Yeah, we have no business arising for the minutes, and we'll move right into item 5, which is a deputation for Mr. Chris Appleton. Welcome. Chris is a member of the Monitoring Strategy Guidance Group, and I don't know if is or was vice chair of the Lake Management Plan Community Advisory Panel, but I'll let him give you an update. Welcome, Chris. Always good to see you, sir. So go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and the board. Thank you for receiving me today. Yes, I will be talking about environmental management strategy. But first of all, just as a preface, I know you all receive many deputations in your council chambers, and I want to assure you today that I have no complaints, and I'm not asking for any money. So you can all relax and enjoy a positive feedback for a change.
As long as you like in that case.
Yeah. So I am currently the vice chair of the Community Advisory Panel. I was the original chair back in 2010. Some of you will know that I was very involved in the whole lake management process, which was really a great job done by all. I was also involved with the subsequent process of the strategy for lake plan implementation. And I was honored to receive another request for assistance with regard to environmental monitoring. So that's the advisory panel I was on recently. And you're going to receive the full report on that shortly from Emma and Nancy. So I'll leave it to them to take you through the strategy. I just wanted to give you a little background. It was a very interesting project for me because I hadn't really encountered the depth of work that the Conservation Authority does on monitoring. And of course, I was into the weeds with lake planning and implementation, but I discovered a whole new area of activity by the Conservation Authority, and quite impressed, I might add. So as the advisory committee rolled out, the first phase was to hear about all of the activities that are occurring and some maybe 15 programs that are underway. Nancy Aspen was the lead on that with Emma's guidance. And Nancy gave us a very thorough explanation of all of the programs that are underway. She took the committee through a SWOT analysis, what works, what doesn't, what needs to be improved. And all of that, of course, is the substantive work that the organization is doing and forms the basis of your strategy document. So that was phase 1. And I was really impressed. I'm not a science guy, so I learned a lot. The panel had enough interesting perspectives that there were some science people on it. So there were some good discussions about actual elements of the science. So it was a very good discussion. And then the next phase was to actually do the strategy document. So Nancy produced for the committee a first draft of the strategy document. And this is getting a little more into my territory, which is document writing. So we looked at it. And in fairness, the first draft wasn't quite board ready. So the committee worked with Nancy on that. And I'll be honest, we leaned into it pretty hard. We said it needs some work. And afterwards, I thought, oh my goodness, maybe we were a little too hard or a little too not helpful. But one of the things I want to say today is how incredibly impressed I was with what Nancy did to produce the second draft. So instead of being defensive or not really paying attention, she actually came back, was extremely gracious and said, frankly, this is her first strategy document. So she thanked us for our advice. And the second draft was enormously better. It was a huge change. And I said so. I said, it's great. We went from not board ready to really an excellent document. And we talked about it some more. And it's always a challenge to draft by committee, but there were some good and helpful comments. But our second go at it was really more in the realm of editing and tweaking and a little bit here and there. So that's how we got to where we are today. And that's the strategy you're going to hear later in this presentation. So I just wanted to speak up and tell you all some of the background, and also to give a shout out to Nancy, because she's one of the staffers that you probably don't see very much. And I like to give praise when it's due, and to Emma as well for the supervision. But I think Emma will tell you that Nancy was the driver on this. And I'm glad to see that Nancy's on the call, because I really just wanted to say, excellent job. Wanted the board to know that. And I want the board to know that myself and the committee really dug in and helped her collect. We all worked on it. It was a collective effort, but Nancy drove this to a darn good document. And that's what you're going to see, I think, in the next item on the agenda. So I'm not going to steal their thunder. I'm not going to try and describe it. That's their job. Mostly, I just want to say, good job. Well done. So
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, thanks, Chris. Appreciate that. And I'm sure Nancy does as well, and Emma for all the hard work. So if we weren't on Zoom, I think she'd be blushing over there, but we can't tell. So thank you for that. I'll just ask for a motion to receive the deputation. We'll see if anybody has a question. Director Windover, second by Councillor Dunn. Any questions for Mr. Appleton regarding his deputation? Seeing none, anyone opposed to receiving the deputation? Okay, we'll consider that passed. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate that. So let's move right in. Yeah, let's move right into item 6, and we'll get the presentation regarding the integrated watershed management monitoring strategy. I will turn it over to you, Emma, but I know you're going to introduce Nancy and sort of go from there. So take it away.
Thank you. And thank you, Chris, for the deputation and support. We really appreciate it. And we appreciate everybody who has been on the strategic guidance group with us and on this journey. We couldn't have done it without you. So really appreciate that. So I'm delighted to bring to you today a presentation on the monitoring strategy. Nancy is going to take you through highlights of the key recommendations and also talk about the process that we went through to get us to this point. You'll see the actual draft strategy document was included as part of the package for today's meeting as well. And there is an associated action item that we have brought forward with this. So we are looking for endorsement of the strategy in order to go out to public consultation for a 30-day period. And all being well, the intention would be to bring back the final strategy to the board in January 2022. So with that, I'm going to pass over to Nancy to take you through everything. Over to you, Nancy.
Thank you. Am I still muted, or can everyone hear me okay?
You're good.
I'm good. Okay. Perfect. Well, thank you, Chris, for the very, very kind words. This has been definitely an exciting and new journey for me, writing a strategy document. But I'm very excited to be here today to provide a progress update to the board on the environmental monitoring strategy. The Integrated Watershed Management Team currently undertakes monitoring activities to provide scientific data and evidence to inform decision-making locally and provincially. In January of this year, the Integrated Watershed Management Team embarked upon developing a new 10-year environmental monitoring strategy. This strategy aims to help guide our focus on activities and identify future areas of investment. Our intent in the development of this strategy will be to align with our new strategic plan and provide benefits to all high-level goals within our corporate strategy. Our overall goal of this strategy is to provide a cost-effective environmental monitoring network that facilitates evidence-based decision-making and that provides accessible real-time science and data to our community, while aligning with our strategic goals and that of our municipal partners. This slide represents the key timeline components of the strategy. We are currently approaching the 30-day public consultation period on the draft plan. Since the last board presentation in April, the strategic guidance group made up of representatives from Fleming College, Trent University, City of Kawartha Lakes, Township of Scugog, Durham Region, Parks Canada, Kawartha Haliburton Pine Ridge District Health Units, Scugog Lake Stewart, Scugog Island First Nations, and Chris Appleton, the CAT Vice Chair and Shoreline residents, along with Kawartha staff, met to go over all background information collected. This information included both the engagement surveys and the 46-page comprehensive program review document, which included a SWOT analysis, feature benefit value, and a program resource overview for each of our current environmental monitoring programs. The committee felt before the draft strategy could be written, some additional information needed to be collected. So a more detailed program review was undertaken for each program, where questions were asked specific to policy, financial investment, data collection, technology, and reporting. On conclusion of this detailed program review, enough information was gathered to begin writing the draft strategy. The strategic guidance group provided valuable feedback on what the strategy document should look like and what types of information should be provided. As the strategy was drafted, it became apparent what recommendations should be made to ensure we meet the strategy goal. The detailed program review exercise allowed us to drill down on specific information for each current program area relating to policy, financial investment, data collection technology, and reporting. It provided clarity on the following types of information. 9 out of 12 current programs fall under the mandated programs based on the new CA Act amendments just recently released. MOU agreements based on the new amendments would need to be established for the biomonitoring, temperature monitoring, and land use programs. However, for the land use program, pieces of that program can be deemed mandated, while other pieces are not mandated. For example, wetland information for regulation is mandated, but knowing where different land classes are located on the watershed or not, this particular program area would need further investigation to determine if an MOU is required. Based on this analysis, it was determined that all of our current programs are driven by some type of policy, whether it be through our internal policies or at the federal, provincial, and regional level. Some of these policies include climate change strategies, Clean Water Act, Planning Act, Environmental Protection Act, the Drainage Act, and official plans. These are just a few examples. It was also determined that 8 out of our 12 programs require some upfront investment to reduce long-term costs. This would include costs associated with purchasing equipment, installation, and staff time. Usually this cost is only incurred for the first year, and then the costs reduce drastically as monitoring is initiated. Through this detailed analysis, it was also recognized that 50% of our current programs experience gaps across our watershed where no data is being collected. These programs would benefit from an expansion, which would allow for a more comprehensive data set and analysis across our jurisdiction. It was also recognized that 50% of our current monitoring equipment has the technology in place to enable remote data management, allowing for easy access to our monitoring data through the internet. It appears that majority of our programs report on a 5-year interval, and usually the reporting is related to the watershed report cards. Over the last 2 months, the draft strategy has been completed. This 18-page document has been established to help direct the environmental monitoring program over the next 10 years. The strategy aligns with our new corporate strategic plan and includes recommendations and actions we plan to execute over the next 10 years. On the advice of the Strategic Guidance Group, we also developed a 1-page infographic highlighting the strategy recommendations. On conclusion of the in-depth review of each current program, it became clear what we need to do moving forward. A total of 8 recommendations have been established, along with 3 intended actions that the IWM team will aim to achieve over the next 10 years. Recommendation number 1 is to ensure that we continue to keep monitoring the core elements of the existing environmental monitoring program as outlined in the strategy. They include biomonitoring, climate, groundwater, land use, temperature monitoring, water quality, and water quantity programs. Recommendation number 2 recommends that we migrate key parameters in the monitoring equipment to real-time where feasible to reduce long-term costs. Recommendation number 3 is to establish new monitoring sites that will help fill in data gaps across our watershed, with the target of filling those data gaps by 30% over the next 10 years. Recommendation number 4, that we continue to track land use changes across the watershed every 5 years. Recommendation number 5 is that we report regularly on environmental monitoring programs in an understandable and accessible format to support support decision-making by Kawarthas Conservation and partners to enhance watershed health. We will aim to report annually on key findings for each program area. Recommendation number 6 is moving towards open data to establish a platform for sharing data we collect. We work towards making 75% of our data accessible through our website over the next 10 years. Recommendation number 7 recommends that we continue to collaborate with municipal and community partners, agriculture, academia, and First Nations moving forward, recognizing that reducing duplication and efforts by sharing data, key findings, and integrating efforts with partners wherever possible. And finally, the last recommendation is that we continue exploring efficiencies and innovations in environmental monitoring programs and emerging issues across the watershed. To help summarize the recommendations for the strategy, this 1-page infographic was designed. This graphic was generated to complement the written strategy and to use for future promotion. With the board's endorsement of the draft environmental monitoring strategy, we will then allow for a 30-day public consultation period during the month of November to allow public to comment on the draft strategy. The strategic guidance group will meet again in December to go over comments and final revisions. On December 15th, I will be presenting the last Lunch and Learn IWM speaker series about the environmental monitoring strategy and the process we took through 2021 to develop the final document. We hope to have final adoption of the strategy at the January 2022 board meeting. That concludes my presentation. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to provide an update on the environmental monitoring strategy. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Good presentation. So let's get a motion to receive the integrated watershed management monitoring strategy be received. Can I get you to pull down the screen just so I can see?
Yes, sorry.
That's okay.
There you go.
Thank you. Catherine, will you move that to be received? And Kathleen, will you second that? I don't have you on screen. Are you okay with that?
Yes, I'm good for that.
And Kathleen, will you second that? Just to be received?
Yep, I'll second that.
Thank you. Any questions for Nancy or Emma regarding that presentation? Director Hooper, go ahead.
Excellent presentation and congratulations on the wonderful work you did on it. Does it, once we've approved and received this information, does it go before, will it go before City of Kawartha Lakes Council, just so, you know, for an update?
ahead, Nancy.
Emma.
Jump in at that point.
I suppose through the chair to the chair. How's that?
So yes, so through the chair, if I may, we can certainly do that. We haven't scheduled it to go to council at this point. I would say if we get the final strategy endorsed by the board of directors in January, at that point, I will be then looking to see, you know, when would be the best timing to share that with council. There would also be an implementation phase following the actual strategy document in terms of how do we make that work on the ground. So yeah, we can certainly build that in.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, I've actually talked to Mark about doing a presentation in the spring to council, just an update on the work plan. So that might fit in nicely timing wise with that. Thank you. Any other questions? Ted, Director Smith, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Not really a question, but thanks very much for your presentation, and you'd certainly be welcome to present at the region of Durham as well. But when appropriate.
There you go. We'll put you on the on the traveling schedule. Careful what you wish for, right? So I had just a quick question. The one slide you had the data gap, 50% data gap, but 50% of your monitoring stations are remote or can report remotely. Is that related? I mean, are those two separate things, or are they sort of related? Because only 50% are remotely monitored, you've got a data gap. I mean, is there any relation to those two statements that you had on the one slide?
I'd say no to that. It just kind of happened that way. 3 of our programs have the remote data capabilities, and then the rest don't. It just fell that way. Depending on the program we have, like some program areas, we have, you know, a ton of data that we collect, and then some areas we only, you know, center on, say, urban centers, and then we have a gap around the rural areas of our watershed. So it was just, it just happened to work out like that.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. Any other questions? We have a motion to receive the presentation. Anyone opposed to that? Good. We'll consider that passed. Thank you very much for that. Much appreciated. So we'll go right into the report, item 6.1.1, which is the action item, which is the recommended resolution. While they're still here, resolved that the draft monitoring strategy be endorsed for a public consultation period of 30 days. Anybody want to move and second that? Director Smith, seconded by Director Hooper. Sorry, did I see your hand up? Director Hooper? Yes? No? Yes? Okay, seconded. Thank you. Any questions or comments on the actual report? Anyone opposed to that resolution on the report?
No.
We'll consider that passed. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good. Good presentation. Thank you. So let's move down to, and thanks, Chris Appleton, for your input on that as well. Much appreciated. Let's move down to item 6.2, which is the presentation, I believe, on the integrated watershed management. No, sorry, lake management plan implementation stewardship projects. Christy is going to give us an update on that. So go ahead, Christy.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to share my screen here. Is everyone seeing my screen?
Yeah.
Excellent. Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and to the board for allowing me to make this presentation. I will say I'm quite excited to inform the board about some of the activities that have been taking place over the last 3 years. I know that it seems like over the last couple of years, especially, there's been all kinds of talk about COVID and what it's been doing to programs and to progress. And while I can't promise that I won't utter the word COVID during my presentation, I can say that we've done some pretty incredible work over the last 3 years, and I'm really excited to be sharing that with you. I think that we are able to highlight some of the really extraordinary activities that we've been doing, but also the innovations to our programs in order to sort of put our best foot forward and take advantage of different partnerships and funding opportunities over the course of the last 3 years. So the implementation of both our lake management plans as well as our watershed plans, this is a combination of all of our stewardship programs right across the watershed. It's not specific to any one municipality. But if anyone has any questions with regards to what has gone on within their own jurisdictions, please let me know. I probably have that information at my fingertips, or I can certainly access it fairly quickly. We pulled this information together based on a couple of different strategies. Obviously, the stewardship strategy that was approved by the board in 2020, which really set some pretty aggressive KPIs with regards to our stewardship programs and allowed us to provide some really quantitative reporting to the board. We also took a look at our implementation action plan, which was done in 2018, started to implement in 2019, which really took a look at our different program areas, our different communities, and how they impact water quality and lake health. And so we broke down our programs into different projects and deliverables for the board to digest. So out of those programs, in our general program, we talked about things like our community grant program and our landowner grant programs. And those were programs that were identified to help individual landowners as well as community groups implement our lake management plans. We've been doing programs in Durham region as well with the Water Fund. The community grant program, I can tell you that over the last 3 years, as you can see, we've done quite a bit of work. 2 of those projects are still under consideration. So you can see the asterisks there for the 2 aquatic plant control projects. Those are currently being reviewed by the committee, and our committee's meeting at the second week of November to make recommendations on those applications. So they're in here with that asterisk, recognizing that there's still some work to be done. So as you can see, 9 projects that have been done over the last 3 years, and that's given a time when community groups weren't necessarily always getting together in order to pull together some of these projects. So it's quite exciting to see this kind of a response. And I'm hoping that over the next couple of years, as we continue with our implementation action plan, that these are going to continue to grow. As you can see, the leverage funding, $112,000 for a $28,000, $29,000 investment has been quite significant right across the community. Our water fund program, so this is our private landowner grants. Over the last 3 years, we've done 72 projects. So we have provided 72 small grants to landowners to do some really big work. As you can see, you're looking at about $133,000 in grants, with $579,000 in leverage contributions from landowners and from some of those other grant programs that landowners can access. Out of that, So when you shake that all out, we've got a pretty even split between our shoreline and our agricultural community with regards to the applications that came forward. We're starting to see an uptick in the interest in urban projects, and of course 13 rural non-agricultural projects. So that would be things like those 5-10 acre lots they're looking to do some tree planting, or they might be doing some well or septic upgrades. So some really great work that's being done on those properties. Next, we have our rural program, and our rural program is sort of broken out. You know, you heard me talk a moment ago about our rural non-ag versus our rural agricultural communities. That's because those two communities, well, they, you know, we tend to think of them as both being rural. They both have very different needs from the land and from the landscape, as well as different types of projects that can be done in order to improve water quality. And so in addition to all of that work that we were doing with those grant programs, you can see that we also have accessed some financial support from OMAFRA. So in 2019, they provided us a 2-year grant, which closes off at the end of this year. So it was for $99,750. And that was to do demonstration sites on private land properties. So while these projects are also being done on landowner properties, they were handled separate from our water fund. These are projects that we project managed as opposed to leaving it to the landowner to project manage them. So out of that $99,000, almost $50,000 of it was in project support. And we did 4 different projects. We're just finalizing them now and doing some videos and some virtual tours of those properties. But everything from creating a wetland and doing some exclusion fencing. We did tile drain control, water control feature. We also did some eavesdropping on barns to divert stormwater off of manure piles and whatnot. So some really big projects, really big impact on that water quality and quantity within the Talbot River subwatershed. We also introduced our forestry program, our reforestation program. This year, we really kicked it off with our 50 million tree program. We did do some smaller tree planting projects in 2019, took advantage of a grant in order to get that done, but we really did kick this project off in 2021. And as you can see, over the course of the last 3 years, we've put in about 54,000 trees in the ground, which is pretty significant. That's done through both our tree planting projects, so those 10 projects, as well as through our tree seedling sale that we hold every year. And we're able to continue to do even through COVID. So our shoreline program really focuses on private land stewardship of shorelines, talking about erosion control. We do everything from shoreline stabilization to renaturalizing shorelines, those types of projects. We also do some public demonstration sites in order to highlight the types of projects that can be done on private land. And through our program in the last 3 years, we've done 2 of those demonstration sites, one in Williams Creek. That's the stream picture on the left-hand side, or it's on my left-hand side anyway. And it sort of shows some revegetation in along an urban creek that runs through Port Perry. And then that got rid of a lot of invasive species, but also did some shoreline stabilization in an area that is quite prone to some flooding throughout various seasons. And then we also did some work with the Sturgeon Point Golf Club to stabilize their shoreline. And you can see the construction of some planter beds that went into the sloped shoreline in order to support those soils. And that was done in partnership with the club. They helped to raise funds in order to implement that project. And then of course, in addition to that, we've also continued with our Watershed Welcome program. And this is a program that we do with our real estate experts that go out and sell shoreline properties. We create an information kit, sort of like your welcome wagon type situation, where they get an information kit about all the types of resources and things they should be concerned about when it comes to shoreline ownership. And they are able to provide that to their clients when a shoreline property changes hands, which sometimes can be quite frequent. Our urban program has been an interesting one. It has gone through quite an interesting evolution over the last couple of years. Originally, when we launched this program, we were going to be focusing on the development community and working with the development community to integrate some low impact design with regards to some of the new builds going on. But then we had the opportunity to access a $75,000 grant through the Environmental Damages Fund to do some urban stream restoration. And so we shifted our focus. This is one of those sort of pivot moments within the program where we shifted our focus and said, you know, this is an opportunity for us to do some really neat work on the landscape with existing shoreline urban stream property owners. And so this grant actually provides us with the opportunity to do 10 such programs across urban streams within the city of Kawartha Lakes over the next 2 years. So in 2021, we're going to be doing 3 streams. Some of those are already underway and some of them will be finished up within the next few weeks, and do some video development with regards to erosion and sedimentation control that we can share with the development community, but also with private landowners when they're looking to do different work. So this was a really unique opportunity that sort of allowed us to shift a little bit, shift our focus, but capitalize on that funding opportunity. In addition to that, we've continued to seek out other sources of funding for things like our urban tree planting program, which we do in the fall. We do 2 sites typically every year. That was canceled in 2020 due to COVID. And we're hoping that we get to do some planting this fall on 1 site as part of a staff planting as opposed to a community planting. But we've also done some low impact design projects at Alexander Public School here in Lindsay, where we did some rain gardens and some tree planting with some of the students and taught them the importance of, you know, things like rain gardens and making sure that water infiltrates into the ground as opposed to runs off. We also did a demonstration site rain garden at Ken Reed. And again, those 2 projects were funded by the RBC program. And then RBC also contributed $60,000 to some urban demonstration sites going into 2021. So we did the bioretention installation, which is the photo on the left. That was a refresh of a previous project in Port Perry that helps to reduce runoff of a parking lot. We did the Kent Street Silvacell project, which is a tree cell project right in downtown Lindsay during a downtown revitalization project that was already taking place. Original plans was to support 1 tree, but with the funding from RBC, we were actually able to install these cells so that we can support 3 street trees. And it just helps the rainwater infiltrate in and allows the roots to cross over so that they're not confined. And then lastly, we have our Port Perry permeable pavement project, which was slated to go in 2021. We have had some project delays with that due to some soil movement, some policies around soil movement that the township has advised me that they have to delay the implementation of that project. So we're hoping to do that in 2022. We're just negotiating with our funder on that. So when you break it all down by the numbers, stewardship by the numbers, we've done 54,400 trees that we planted over the last 3 years. 15 different demonstration sites, a combination of both public and private land. We've worked with 72 landowners to do some improvement projects that improve water quality on our lakes and streams, 9 community grants, leveraging over $700,000 in community investment and almost $300,000 in project grants. And that concludes my presentation. I want to thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Great presentation, great visuals.
Great, yeah.
Thank you.
Some of the projects we do, our presentations are the background work, and others are the work that we see, right? The visuals. Yeah. So that's certainly one that certainly makes an impact. So thank you. I'll just ask for a motion to receive the stewardship projects related to the Lake Management Implementation Action Plan, that the presentation be received, please. Robert, thank you. And seconded by Director Moore. Thank you. Any questions for Christy on the presentation? Seeing none, we have well done. You got away easy today. We have a motion to receive. So anyone opposed to the motion to receive?
No.
Okay, we'll consider that passed. Thanks very much, Christy. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Great update. Okay, let's move into item 7, staff reports. Item 7.1 is the permits issued by designated staff. I believe Ron is with us. Going to give us his usual quick update. Looks like you're staying the course on some pretty good recording there, Ron. So go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, it's nothing substantially different. It was a fairly busy week, fairly busy month again for reporting in September. We were able to meet a good deal of our required calc deadlines, and fulfilling on only the one. And I can report that we just this week went over the 400 permit mark, so we will very likely be hitting a new record high in permits this year, at least in the time that I've been here. I think the record overall, but things are moving along well, and I think more and more people are getting used to the COVID world and how everything works electronically, and it really does help to speed things along. I will say that the process is lubricated nicely by by the use of the internet and electronics throughout. And I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Any questions for Ron on the permitting? Councillor Dunn, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Great report, Ron. I'm assuming, and you can tell me if I shouldn't, that the one that's way off the mark is still because of incompleted paperwork. So my question is, do we anticipate it's going to get done, or has that applicant withdrawn?
The application was complete. The application, it was completed and has been issued.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions for Ron? Okay, can I get a motion then that the Section 28 permits issued by staff and the permitting performance report be received, please? Moved by Director Windover, seconded by Director Moore. Thank you. Anyone opposed to that motion? We'll consider it passed. Thank you. Thanks, Ron.
Thank you.
7.2 is strategic actions update for the third quarter. I will turn it over to Mark. Go ahead, sir.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The third quarter updates are tied in with our strategic corporate strategic plan, and really represents all the work that our excellent team has been doing to fulfill a number of those commitments over this last quarter of a year. As you can see, there's a lot of activity that's been had in a number of areas across all departments, and that is reflected in the work. A lot of work in source water, work on stormwater guidelines that we anticipate bringing to the board fairly shortly, and then all these special projects. You see, there's quite a significant amount of work that's going on that really ties in nicely with the corporate strategic plan. With that, maybe what I'll do is I'll just stop there and just say that all of our directors and myself are available for any questions that you might have on the report.
Okay, sounds good. Are there any questions on the strategic action update for the third quarter from Mark or any of the directors?
No.
I guess you got it covered. Sorry, Catherine, Director Moore, did you have a question?
No, I was just saying I'm good. It's good.
You're good.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. In that case, can I get a motion that the staff report on strategic action update for the third quarter be received, please?
I'll do that. It's Kathleen.
Moved by Director Seymour Fagan, seconded by Director Dunn. Any further questions? Anyone opposed to that motion? That motion is passed. Thank you. CAO report, item 7.3. Mark, go ahead, sir.
Great, thank you. Do a couple of highlights in the CAO report. There is a report a little bit later in the agenda on the release of the regulations by the province that support changes to the Conservation Authorities Act. So there's been a lot of background work that's gone on in terms of kind of understanding what that means and kind of relating back to our business specifically. There's, of course, it was the first Truth and Reconciliation Day that was announced by the federal government. We want to take that seriously and also consider it an opportunity to learn a little bit more about that history of residential schools, also about First Nations culture as a whole. So we posted information on our internal team site, and we also made sure that our community was aware that we were supportive of that day as well, and recognizing its significance. I've also met with Jeff Forbes, and my thanks to him and to their cultural coordinator Matthew Stevens. Had some really great discussions with them on our First Nation acknowledgement, and we hope to bring that forward to the board fairly soon as well. Conservation Ontario Council had a meeting, and I'd say the highlight at that meeting was probably the Conservation Authorities Act discussions. It was actually just before the regulations were released, if I remember right. But there was some good discussion on that. But in addition to that, there was a number of model bylaw changes that were adopted by Council. And so we provided one of those updates in this board meeting, and we'll look at providing the update to the administrative bylaw number 2 that deals with our hearings guidelines to stay in conformity with the Act. In terms of communications, there's been some great work that's been going on related to the source water program, and that's thanks to John Chambers and his connections, as well as to Jenna Stevens, our source water technician. So they've been working with a road sign campaign, and I know that a couple of our board members have participated in that as well. So my thanks to you on that. In terms of resources, there's a few vacancies right now. We're looking at filling those. We have some interviews that have just happened, and we have some that are coming up fairly shortly. So we're looking forward to getting some support in place for those positions. There's 3 of them in particular. And interesting as well, I think that this actually happened yesterday, is that we had a meeting with the local real estate board highlighting source water and highlighting our permitting process and permitting requirements, and what does that mean for real estate agents, and explaining a little bit of that for them so that they're all informed. And that was done in conjunction with the City of Kawartha Lake staff, their planning staff. So that was a great joint initiative. Enforcement continues to be busy on the landscape. Seems like a busier year than most years. And in terms of floodplain mapping, we have one floodplain mapping left to do, and we are working with the Ganarask and Haliburton County on that initiative up to the north on their floodplain mapping up there. So we're working on both projects. There's, as you saw, a lot of activity going on with the special projects. So there's a few updates provided in the CIO report there, but I think Christie's presentation did a great job of outlining all the work that's going on there. And some other exciting news in the conservation area side of things is the Talking Forest app is really taking off, it seems. A lot of great interest in it. We had a presentation that was given by a person that you probably don't see too often either, kind of like Nancy. Nancy's is a GIS technician as well, so working on the computers all day, but she has some great skill sets that of course you're able to see with the environmental monitoring strategy. But Melissa Creasy Alexander is another one of those people that you hardly ever see. She carries a chainsaw in her back pocket, but she's also been instrumental in the Talking Forest and getting that going along with Christy. So So she presented at Laternal, and it received the most interest out of the presentations that were identified for that particular topic. So that's great. You see some stats there on the app itself, and there's some great things that we're hoping for out of that program going forward. Great thing is it's supported as well from RBC Tech for Nature program. There is an exciting announcement I can't speak about too much, but stay tuned for that as well, since there will be some recognition coming towards us. The other thing I'll mention kind of ties in with some of the fee structures that were approved earlier in the year. Is we had a second film come to us looking for a site, and able to enter into an agreement with them. So we were able to host another film in Ken Reed and Durham East Cross Forest. So some great news on that front. And we have purchased a 5-acre parcel in East Cross Forest, and we also have been successful in negotiating 2 properties to the Kawartha Land Trust to hold them in long-term protection. Integrated watershed management. One of our big focuses is we collect a lot of information, and we want to make sure that we're sharing it. So we have a lot of information, and it doesn't do any good specific. Well, it does a lot of good in our shop, but it'd be a lot of good in a lot of other shops as well. So, one of our key things is we want to make sure that that we're able to provide the information to our communities and report on the information. So this is one aspect that we've been successful in on a couple of data sets related to low water response. And so we posted it on our website, and it is powered through the business, one of the business platforms, Power BI, that enables data to be looked at and shared and manipulated to some extent as well by the user on the website. So it becomes a powerful tool, and I can see it being used for a number of things, especially when combined with other types of data sets. So really exciting. I can see this being used by the agricultural community, by recreational users, in addition to other decisions that other agencies might be interested in, as a couple of examples. And then the couple other points I'll mention that are going on with the IWM team is a collaborative project with Trent University looking at microplastics. And as you can see, it is the second whole lake field study of its kind in Canada, so kind of special that we're involved in that. And it is an emerging issue that, of course, has been on the radar for a number of years, but in terms of local scope and breadth of a program, there's really not a lot that's similar to it. And finally, starry stonewort is an interesting little macroalgae. So we don't call it necessarily a plant, but what it does do is it takes over all the other plants in the lake, and it's in the area that establishes. So we do see it in Lake Scugog currently. And given Scugog is in the top of the Kawartha Lakes chain, there is a potential for this to move through the system. So that's a little bit concerning, since it does take over. It's a very dense and doesn't promote a lot of other life. So we're just trying to get a handle on that particular plant and what it means exactly. We have heard that it's in a couple of other areas of the province, including Lake Simcoe. So there's some collaborations going on to that end. And with that, I think I'll end my updates there and see if there's any questions from you.
Thanks, Mark. Lots going on as usual. Questions, Director Smith, go ahead.
Yes, thank you through you, Chair Latham. Thanks, Mark, for your report. Just a couple of questions. You mentioned that you had an information session, I believe you called it, with the real estate agents in City Kawartha Lakes. I'd like to see you do one for those real estate agents affected in Durham region as well. Certainly, I mean, I'm in Brock, but there's a pile of real estate agents in Scugog, and they overlap into Brock. And I think it would be very worthwhile if that could be arranged.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. through you, Mr. Chair, that's something that I'll definitely pass on to staff, and that's something that can be arranged, and perhaps in concert with some of the other conservation authorities or municipalities. So that's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. And just one other question. The Talking Forest, I haven't been there yet, but I know it gets rave reviews. Is there a timeline, like in terms of, does it close down for the winter, or does it continue on, or I want to take my granddaughters there someday.
So, Mr. Chair, I can tell, or Mr. Past Chair, I can tell you that I have taken my daughter there, and she loves it. She's very excited. We did the Explore Nature Challenge that the foundation was hosting. And so I decided to try it out, and it is pretty precise on the trail. Like it's you don't like you walk past the tree and then it starts talking. It's not like you're 100 meters away and then you're trying to figure out where this trail is or where this particular tree is that's supposed to be talking to you. It's actually right on the trail, and right as you pass by it, and it's great. It provides it provides a little dialogue, a little bit of a history or use of the plant, or whatever the case is, some interesting facts about it. And the great thing is that when we're looking at expanding it to Windy Ridge, we're able to open up to different areas. But the opportunities are endless, essentially, with it. We can deal with plants, we can deal with geography, like physical landscapes, water. And we are looking at expanding it in a couple of other areas as well that are pretty exciting. So yeah, I highly recommend it. And I know Christy turned on video there, so she might want to add something since she's the inventor of the idea.
Thank you. It is a great idea, and will it continue on indefinitely then? It doesn't shut down for the fall or winter or anything?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. It does not shut down through the winter. It runs all seasons. The only thing that might change from time to time, we may change up some of the stories that are told to keep it fresh. But yeah, anytime you come out, you will be able to enjoy it.
Good, thank you. So you can't shut these trees up, and
they're just right chatterboxes. They are.
Good, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on the monthly report? Seeing none, can I get a motion that the CEO monthly report be received, please? Moved by Director Windover, seconded by Director Smith. Anyone opposed to receiving it? Okay, we'll consider that passed. Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Correspondence, a lot of correspondence. Mark, I don't know, I'm afraid to ask you for an update if you're going to go through 300 pages of correspondence, but give us a quick overview and we'll see if there's any questions.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll give a brief update on the correspondence. A couple of pieces respond to Director Rock and just welcome him to the board. So a couple there from Scugog and from the region of Durham. There's a budget business plan item that was provided from region of Durham that helps outline our budget and the requirements from there. The email that was sent on the regulations to the Conservation Authorities Act was included for your information, and a couple of different correspondence from Toronto region that thought you might find interesting. One details the water balance modeling, which is sort of the end point and ties in with compensation. So they actually provide a fairly detailed report that was awfully long. So my apologies for the length of that one, but it is quite detailed and is pretty informative. And the other one is Toronto Region outlining their process on the Conservation Authorities Act changes and their discussions with municipalities to this point. So I thought that might be interesting for context. And sort of the level that they're looking at this point in time. So that is a summary of the correspondence there, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Sounds good. Any questions on the correspondence for Mark? Seeing none, can I get a motion to receive the correspondence, please? Mover and a seconder. Director Dunn, seconded by Director Hooper. Any further questions? Anyone opposed to receiving the correspondence? We'll consider that passed. Thank you. Thanks for that, Mark. So let's go down to item 8, which is action items. 8.1 is some updates to the Provincial CA Act Phase 1 regulation. So I'm going to turn it over to Mark, and I know this is kind of important. So take your time, Mark, and give us a good overview, and hopefully we can have a discussion about it. Go ahead.
Yep, great. Thank you. So the Conservation Authorities Act regulations were released on October 1st. The correspondence we got from the ministry was the 4th. So there's a little bit of kind of transition time on there, and just to get things up and running. I think it was actually placed on the e-laws website on the 5th, on the Friday. So that kind of is the general time frame. There's been a few discussions in between. There's still a few discussions to happen in terms of trying to understand how some of the elements get implemented. But I think by and large, the ministry, working with the working group, addressed a number of different points that were concerns in the original kind of layout of the regulation content. The regulation itself was never actually posted for comment, but the general comment, the white paper, was I believe in May, right around there, that it was released for comment and consultation. So the working group worked with the province, and that is a multi-agency group. Contains members from municipalities, AMO, development sector, conservation authorities, and a couple of private interest groups. And so they've been working with the province, and they've had some really good dialogue on things, and so this was the result of those pieces of kind of consultation that were had with that group specifically, and addressing the comments that were received by and large from the community earlier in the year. So they have 3 regulations. One is the mandatory programs and services regulation. The other is the transition plan and agreements. And the third is rules of conduct in conservation areas. The third one, by and large, for us is inconsequential, and probably by and large for all authorities is inconsequential. They really just combined all 36 into one reg, and combined all the bits and pieces that were unique and maybe individual ones into that reg as well. So as a result, we see some pretty interesting things that other CAs had in their regulations that we haven't seen. But the first 2 are probably the more critical ones for how we move forward. We also know, just as a bit of background, that there is a second phase of regulations. We don't know how many regulations exactly that will be, whether it's 1 or 2 or maybe 3, but that is dealing with the municipal levy component. We know currently in the Conservation Authorities Act there are 2 different regulations, so whether that gets combined into 1 or they keep them as 2 or change content, that's still to be determined. And they will be released. The thought is during the year, based on this one, it might be a little bit longer, it might run into next year, but the anticipation is to release them at some point in time soon. There's an additional regulation that will affect our permitting activities as well, and that's being led by the Ministry of Northern Development, Mines and Natural Resources. So we don't know exactly when that one will come about, and so that is something that we'll kind of play by ear and kind of go forward from there. But we do know that the conservation areas regulation is going to be held up in terms of enforcing it until that is in place. So then moving into the mandatory programs and services regulation, I think probably what I'll do is I'll run maybe through the one regulation first, and then see if there's any questions, if that makes sense, and then move on to the transition plans. So the mandatory programs and services regulation, I've tried to summarize it for you there. There are a number of categories that are identified as mandatory programs by this regulation. It comes into force at the beginning of the year, and then has to be in place by January 2024. So they recognize there's a bit of a transition period in there. The categories that are identified are natural hazards, and there's a number of subcomponents there, which I describe a little bit later. Conservation lands, source water protection. There's Lake Simcoe and other legislation. Those actually don't apply to us, so I haven't provided a summary in there. But the last one does, and it's prescribed in regulation. And there's 3 different categories of programs identified in there. And all of those are eligible for municipal levy. So moving into the first category, it's natural hazards. And they identify a couple of kind of overarching statements that identify what needs to be in there and some general components. And then they roll into the actual programs and services at that point with some specific detail. The specific details I did not include in this report because there's a lot of them, and really they're just program components that have to be in play and didn't substantially affect the outcome of what needed to be done. So you see the objectives there. Basically have an awareness for natural hazards, understanding of the risks and how they might be affected by climate change. So that was a new component that is new to our programming. Managing the risks, including preventing or mitigating risks, promoting public awareness of the risks. So we do all of those, which is great. And one of the other important components, which we see in the next element, is that each of those components on natural hazards includes the collection, provision, and management of information. Includes the development of plans and policies that support delivery. An example of that would be our all the work that we do in planning and permitting is supported by the Watershed Manual, Planning and Permitting Policies Manual, and any supporting guidelines that are associated with that. Public awareness, education, outreach, and the consultation on the development of provision of services. So we do all of those, and I think the important part is, to the extent appropriate, leave a lot of flexibility for the difference between Toronto region and ourselves. And I think based on the correspondence, you can see that there's they have a different level of detail that they go to that we don't currently employ. So that does allow for some scalable results. The individual programs and services that are identified, that again, those above components relate to, are flood forecasting and warning. So there are 7 different points that are identified that have to be program components, and we do pretty good. I've actually done a preliminary kind of look at our programs related to the elements identified in the regulation, and we're pretty well covered on this element. If there's a few areas that we could improve upon. For instance, there's an element that deals with the analysis of local surface water hydrologic conditions related to potential flood, potential and risk, and to understand and quantify the response and potential impacts within watersheds to specific events and conditions. So I would say we have a general understanding, but not specific. So that would be, an area that we would need to focus in on, and quite frankly, we want to go there anyway. So it's a natural evolution of the program. The floodplain mapping really helps with that, because it really identifies for those flood damage centers what stage of flood you might be in, and now it's just a matter of relating the rainfall event to that information. So that would be the part that we need to work on a little bit more, and then for the other components, we are evolving in that area to address some of those requirements a little bit better, even than what we do right now. For drought or low water response, there's actually 7 points related to that, and again, those are elements that we currently have with the agreement with the province on this. It's just translated the agreement into now the regulation. So kind of interesting that it's more legal, I guess you can say, now than it used to be. But all those components are identified. There's a few areas that we can, of course, improve upon, but I think we can handle that more or less within our existing scope. Ice management was interesting. So the development of an ice management plan. So this is the one that we don't currently have, and I would say is questionable whether or not it actually is something that we need to do. And that was a component that was identified in the Act or the regulations, is it may not be necessary for every single CA. Other CAs, such as down in Moira or Ganaraska, they have some ice issues. Otonabee has fragile ice that causes some flooding issues. And of course, on the Great Lakes shorelines, you have just a bigger dynamic. And Simcoe with Lake Simcoe is a large inland lake. So it's questionable whether or not we actually need to do this, but I think it's probably worthy of some evaluation at least. The next component is infrastructure. Great thing about this is we don't have any infrastructure, so we're able to skip over it fairly quickly. And there's a couple of reports that are required as well by the regulation, and we don't need to do those. The province did identify that we have the ability to provide comments related to acts, and so this would be kind of provincial responsibilities as a delegated natural hazard responsibility. And those are tied into several different points. Just trying to find it here in my detail. There we go. Aggregate Resources Act, Drainage Act, Environmental Assessment Act. Those all apply to us. The one that doesn't is the Niagara Escarpment Planning and Development Act. So these are a matter of course for things that we do anyway. The next component is plan review. So they identify as a as the designate for natural hazards. How do we provide those comments for the for planning applications, for instance? And we do all components that are identified in the regulations. So we're on solid footing on that element as well. And then of course on the enforcement side of the Act, we cover off that as well. That's compliance and making sure that the regulations are enforced across the waters. So that covers off natural hazards as one kind of big component of the mandatory programs. They do identify a couple other areas. Conservation management of lands is one of those key pieces. The original guidance identified that there was a requirement for every single property to do a management plan. So they have removed that as a comment, and that was one of our comments actually to the ministry. What they've done now is said have a conservation area strategy for all properties, and that makes a lot more sense. And indeed, that was our comment. So that's required by December 31st, 2024. So that'll be the year following the municipal agreements being struck. And they identify a number of things that have to be included as part of that mandatory program. And that includes things like securing the land, make sure there's no trespass to property, entrances are maintained, fencing is available for the properties, as an example, to reduce the liability concerns. Maintaining trails, and this was another component that the province listened to us and probably a number of others across the area, was having people on your property actually is a good thing because it helps promote the security of your properties. So passive recreation is now included. What's not included are things that require a specific body to assist with. That would be, for instance, an education program or a community event. Christmas at Ken Reed would be an example of that. So those would have to be specifically agreed to by municipalities. But having, for instance, our dog park, I think would qualify as a passive recreation. Certainly the trails and general infrastructure road would qualify as passive. And you see the other lists identified in the conservation lands as well. One other point maybe I'll mention in there, aside from some of the other points that they've identified, is that the province listened to us on the disposition of property as well. So we are able to not only acquire, but also dispose of property. And that in accordance with the strategy. So that's good news as well. that there is a requirement for a land inventory in addition to the strategy that will be required again at December 31st, 2024. So the two are kind of hand in hand. And I would say that related to this, we would need to develop the conservation area strategy. We don't currently have something exactly like that, but we do have master plans for each of the individual conservation areas that we have. So it would be a matter of bringing those in together. And in terms of the inventory, I think we're well positioned for the inventory as well, but we are aware of a couple of historic interests in title that we would have to make sure that we're capturing in this. So that's the one component that would take a little bit of time just to make sure that we have all of those interests on title captured. In terms of other programs and services, this is the category that was identified within the regulations as within 1 year of being prescribed by the minister that there are some programs that could be included. So the programs that are included are the two provincial programs that we currently are working with the province on, and that is the Provincial Groundwater Monitoring Program and the provincial, what we call it is the Provincial Water Quality Monitoring Program, but they have it listed as a stream monitoring program. So those are ongoing, and actually some of the requirements for those program areas are again elements that we conduct on a regular basis. So they're all included with what the agreements already in place are with the province. It's just placed in regulation now. The one new one is the development and implementation of a watershed-based resource management strategy. So this is something that really we don't have an equivalent for. So we would have to produce it and meet the requirements that the province has set out in regulation to make sure that's in place. The element that is mandatory are all the mandatory services. So that would include the provincial groundwater monitoring program, the stream water monitoring, source water, conservation lands, and would cover off the hazard component. It would not cover off other components. For instance, on the natural heritage side of things, management plans, anything that was education oriented, not related to those mandatory programs. So it is a finite scope unless municipalities agree to include those. I think what would be interesting is if we end up in a situation where some municipalities want to include and some don't, you would end up with a patchwork kind of strategy at the end. So ideally, it would benefit if there was the programs as a whole were included based on municipality support. So it is a strategy, of course. So the investment in that would probably be more limited, but that is the program itself for other programs and services and for that resource management strategy. The other component that is identified as a mandatory program is source water protection, and all of that really is identified. They actually list a fairly significant list of things that are required as part of that provincial or as that role as a source protection authority, and those essentially are all part of the existing agreements with the province. So again, they've taken agreements and placed them in regulation. There are some interesting implications with source water as we get into the transition plans, which I'll mention maybe at that point in time. And that rounds out the mandatory programs and services regulation. Any questions on that? And I'll answer the best I can based on what I know at this point in time.
Thanks, Mark. Is there any surprises here? Is there anything that jumps out as you as a big concern or a surprise?
I wouldn't say there's anything that's a surprise, but I'm very happy that the province has listened to the comments and that they've been working with the working group to produce something that is workable. So I don't know if I would say it's a surprise, but I'm pleasantly happy that they were able to consider all those and produce something that makes sense.
Sounds good. Any questions on that portion for Mark? a lot of information there, but important stuff. So it doesn't look like it, Mark. So do you want to run us through the transition plans?
Yep. So the transition plan and program for programs and services, this identifies, and you see it's section 21.1.2, that refers back to anything that's not mandatory. So these are the other programs and services that a conservation authority has ongoing. So just going to pull up my other spreadsheet here in case I need it. There we go. So the programs and services, these are things that require municipal support aside from, again, those mandatory programs. So an example would be, as Nancy mentioned in the environmental monitoring strategy, those are the biomonitoring elements. For instance, this provincial streamwater monitoring is included, our KWW program. Another aspect is the cold water streams program that we have. It supports the Planning Act and identifying cold water streams, but what it doesn't do is address any of the mandatory components for natural hazards. A couple other examples would be our education program. Some of the community events that we host, if they're not fully subsidized. For instance, trying to think of a couple like that. Well, any other communication do that ties in with our biomonitoring or community events, those would not be covered off. So those are just a couple of examples of where agreements would need to be in place. Other ones include, for instance, our agreements with planning departments on the planning natural heritage component or water aspects. Those would be other components that we'd have to have agreements with municipalities for, and it's generally recognized that we do, which we do have for municipalities. Current thing is that those remain in place, and the bigger agreement would reference them. Just as an example of some of the thoughts kind of going around right now. In the regulations, if you kind of parse it out a little bit, it does appear that that if there is a program that is fully subsidized, that we don't have to identify it in the agreement. So that's kind of one element that's kind of useful. We try and get cost recovery whenever we can, but certainly to me it's one of those ones where it would be included in an inventory, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But I'd almost want to have a few more discussions just to get my bearings on that 100%, because the conversations and some of the reg material to me don't jive as much as I want them to. But that is the understanding, at least at this point. So the transition period, and again, it's great. The province listened to the feedback that was being provided. The transition date is set for January 1st, 2024. So this doesn't have to be in place until that point in time. And I've provided a little bit of a graphic to just kind of lay it out a little bit. The transition plan required to be done by this year. The inventory of programs and services would be required by early next year, February 28th. And that would be the internal process. Following that, there would be the provision of the inventory and discussion on MOUs moving forward to January 2024, January 1st. And there's several interim reporting periods required by the ministry. And then at the very end, a requirement for a submission of a final report. A transition plan, it looks like it can be fairly simple. And in my discussions with the chair of the working group, he identified that it can be as simple as, here's the requirements that are identified in the Act, and they're laid out. You'll meet them by this time frame. So it doesn't have to be really crazy, but certainly a Gantt chart always helps kind of visualize things, but it could be text-based, could include some graphics, could include a whole lot more detail if we wanted to. My thought is probably keep it simple is a little better. And so you see it's required by December 31st, 2021. So my intent is to produce that for our November meeting. So that is where I'm aiming to go at this point in time, and keeping it simple kind of works at that point in time for the timeline on it. Inventory of programs and services is the next requirement in the Act, and that has to be done by February 28th of next year. And this is really listing all the programs and services that we currently provide or that we plan on providing. So it could be a new program that comes online. It could be the existing programs. And essentially what it is here's the cost, and here's all the pieces that support that program. So if the program is supported by municipal revenue, then that would be identified. And I think we'd identify it as well, whether it's a operating levy or whether it was a special project. And then flowing out from there, whether any grants also support those initiatives. The regulation identifies a number of different ways of calculating the cost of the programs, with a catch-all that makes probably the most sense, which is if there's something that deviates from what's presented, just provide a rationale for it. So that is probably the default for the inventory costs. The next stage and that is considered the first phase of the transition period. The second phase is really consultation with the municipalities on that inventory, and also working towards the memorandum of understandings. So the thought is that municipalities would have the inventory of programs and services and would be able to make some evaluated kind of discussions and kind of know what a conservation authority does. I know Chris mentioned earlier, he's been involved with us a long time, and had the environmental monitoring strategy, and he learned a whole bunch of new information that hadn't been exposed to. So I suspect anyone that hasn't sat on a board for a CA might experience something similar, and I think it's just good information to have to start those discussions. So that would provide the background for, like I say, those discussions and figuring out what gets funded and what doesn't. What I can tell you as well is across the province, what we as CAs are trying to do is make sure our terminology matches, so that when we talk about City of Kawartha Lakes and we go into Durham, the Durham CAs are saying the same thing, and they know what that program is. So we're trying to make sure that the terminology is consistent, at least in regional nodes, if not across the entire province. So the regulation, one of the things that was identified in the original content was a very prescriptive nature to those agreements. That has been removed entirely. What they have said instead is, you guys figure it out. So that's great news. That was actually one of our comments as well. And so really happy that the province has considered those comments and implemented those. So the details left up to CAs and municipalities to figure out the exact comment, but they do identify a couple of elements that identify termination clauses for those non-mandatory programs, notice periods for termination, and any dispute mechanism that might be required that's mutually agreeable to both parties. So those are good elements. And as I mentioned, the second phase is due to be completed by January 1st. The province did identify an option for an extension, which would have to be applied for by October 1st, 2023. So they'll be getting of course, the next phase is the progress, but they'll be getting progress reports all the way through on a quarterly basis. And one of the things that they're looking for is, are there any barriers to reaching municipal agreements? Maybe it's timing, just logistical timing, or it might be other factors. But they'll have a heads up essentially already at whether or not it's possible to reach those. So the next element is, of course, those progress reports. There's 6 different progress reports to be required during the time frame. and they include any changes. So we have the initial inventory that would be provided. If there's any changes to the inventory, it has to be reflected on the next progress report. And also the progress of negotiations on the agreements. And they specifically identify and any difficulties that the authority is experiencing with finalizing the agreements prior to the transition period. So that's that is the content of the progress reports, and that is all round up with a final report at the very end of the reporting period at January 31st, which identifies the complete inventory at that point in time, because it might have changed during the consultations, and also confirmation that the agreements have been struck, and that has to be sent to the MECP as well as municipalities. So that is the second reg. That is the transition and consultation on the inventories regulation. Any comments on that reg?
Questions for Mark on that portion? Director Smith, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Wow. Mark, is all this achievable in those timelines? It sounds like report. And how many more staff are we going to have to hire to keep all these reports flowing?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, the number of reports was identified as a potential obstacle, even by the working group. But I think what was determined was that it's probably better to do the interim reports, and they don't have to be complicated either. So similar to the transition plan, it can be fairly simple, a template that you enter information into and kind of go from there. So my thought at this point in time is that we probably wouldn't need to hire any new staff specifically for this. The one caveat might be contract position or two for the resource management report. But for the actual transition plan, I think we would just, kind of nose to the ground and work with municipal partners on the agreements. So that's kind of what I'm thinking as an approach. Interestingly, we did get I know some CAs are doing this, and we got an offer to look at it as well for doing an inventory of programs and services by an economist type consultant group. Their costs are pretty high. So, I mean, we have some great expertise in-house. It'll be during budget period. I know Andy and I have talked about this. Mr. Chair, I have talked about this as well. And we, understanding that, the year end is kind of in place. We have some things that we have to do obligated by some other acts, but we might be able to push off some other elements to achieve this specifically. So I think we're in a reasonably good stead. It'll be a push for sure. But I think we can do this more or less within our existing capacity.
All right, thank you. So, and are these, will these be ongoing, or is this sort of a major once in a while sort of thing? Are these going to be ongoing that we need to do all the time, or mostly just one main time?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, I think you're right, Ted. This will be an ongoing piece. So there is a term that is identified in that there has to be a term identified, and it has to be no more than 5 years. So if it's more than 5 years, then you have to review it. So there will be an ongoing review every 5 years for the agreements, which we generally see with their agreements, like our planning agreements are generally reviewed every 5 years, more or less. Or we generally keep track of it. So there is going to be a need to do that. But I think once we have the framework set, I think the reviews will become a lot easier at that point, because you've already built the house at that point in time. So it's like putting a roof on, or maybe some eaves trough or something like that, maybe a new door. So it shouldn't be too bad after that.
All right, thank you. You're probably no doubt aware that I'm a little cynical when it comes down to the provincial government and its oversight, but I'll leave it at that, and I hope it works out. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any other questions for Mark on that portion? Director Hooper, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mark, for your presentation and answering a lot of questions and posing a couple more. What is the actual outcome that's hoped to be achieved by all of this? You know, it's similar to what Director Smith has asked, and you know, is this a make work project, or you know, I'm just having a hard time trying to figure out what is the actual outcome that they hope to achieve by putting this all this administration work on CA's, you know, staff.
Yep. Through you, Mr. Chair, my candid statements would be that thought has crossed my mind in terms of the work that we do. I don't know if it impacts us a whole lot because our agreements are in place for all of our special projects. It's in place for our operating levy. We do all the things that are required. There are a few elements that aren't in there, like the KWW, right? But they don't amount to very large programs for us. But if I was to hazard a guess, maybe we're a little different than other conservation areas or conservation authorities across the province. They do maybe more things that we do, or sorry, than we do. So they might expand into different areas. I would assume that they would have some agreement to do that, but in the end, what it's really trying to achieve, which you know, even you know, look at information that we're presenting all the time, right? There's a lot of work that we do, and sometimes it's just not well understood. So I think what it's trying to really achieve is these are what CAs do. In case you didn't know, but now it's all transparent. It's out in the, you know, here's a whole list. So you can see it all in one scoop. So if we didn't have that, you still might end up with the discussions about, hey, I didn't know that happened, right? I didn't know that these guys did that. And so this just puts everything on that even playing field where there's transparency across the board. You can't argue about the transparency, right? So municipalities have entered into agreements. You can reference something pretty easy, and the inventory identifies clearly everything that a CA does, a particular CA does. So for me, when I look at it, you know, I think we do a pretty good job of making sure we're in agreements with everything. But you know, in the past, maybe we haven't had as much. So I think we're, you know, it's bringing everyone to that evolutionary state, and then probably you're at a future state as well, where you have so many agreements that maybe you don't even know what you have anymore, right? So it's just bringing everything together, I think. So anyway, that's kind of how I would summarize it and place it.
Great, thanks very much, Mark, and thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mark on the transitional portion? Seeing that, yeah. Do you have some more, Mark?
Yeah. So there's one part that I was going to mention in my presentation and I neglected to. The one element that I mentioned was kind of interesting: source water protection. Source water protection, and when we look at the kind of placement of a mandatory program, is that it can receive a municipal levy. In the Clean Water Act, it also identifies that there may be a requirement for levying municipalities for that clean water component. It is entirely funded by the province currently, but within the Clean Water Act and now within the regulations, it identifies a clear ability to have source water as a levied component of the work that we do, which now brings an interesting point of the other participating municipalities. So we have Halliburton. That is not part of our kind of participating municipality. There is an element in the regulation that identifies circulate the inventory and circulate to anyone that may benefit from it or have interest. So to me, when I look at that, I kind of look at it and say, well, we probably should forward that on to our partners to the north and Uxbridge as well, just to give them a heads up, because they're not included in our levy apportionments, but our source water boundary is different than what our watershed boundary is. So I think it's important consideration to kind of consider, and there might be some correspondence that comes back as well, or some heightened interest as a result. So, but that's something that was kind of crossing my mind, and we actually discussed this amongst our TCC group, and we generally arrived at, yeah, we probably need to do that, but the mechanism for everything that falls, it's okay as long as the province keeps funding the program. What happens when the province doesn't would be the big question. So just wanted to highlight that as well for everyone. And I would say the other interesting part about that is it would include the regional team, so Lower Trent Conservation as well as ourselves. And tied in with that is we have in our source protection area, we might up in the potential situation where we'd be levying for municipalities that don't even have a system. So that would be Highland East and would be Algonquin Highlands and actually Dysart. So 3 of them.
Director Smith, you had a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, just you mentioned provincial funding. Has there been a commitment made there at all, or is it at the discretion of the minister, or is anything like that? Or I mean, if you know, ultimately it will get downloaded. I just wondered how soon.
That's a very good question, Director Smith. It's something I can say right now that there are discussions currently for funding the next year. So that is still in place. Which is great news. Realistically, I think there'd be a lot of concern expressed from a lot of different groups across the province if the province was to pull that funding. Always a possibility, but I think they'd kind of recognize that would be coming towards them fairly quickly upon any sort of announcement. So. But like I say, it's the framework is in place.
All right, thank you.
I'll make that announcement after the provincial election. Don't worry.
You're just as cynical as I am.
Yeah, getting there. Any other questions for Mark? Is that it, Mark? Is that your presentation, or have you got more?
Yeah, you know what? It's pretty much it. I mean, there's some other stuff that's identified in the report, just summarizing everything, like the deliverables, but I've already touched on those. And then there's a regulation, but I've kind of addressed that as well. So I think pretty good.
Okay, yeah, and I know it's a lot of information and a lot of talking for you, but I think it was important. So thank you for that. Any final questions for Mark on that information? It's a lot of information. So there's a resolution here. Resolved that the staff report on the Phase 1 regulations supporting the legislative updates to the Conservation Authorities Act be received. That staff be directed to prepare a transition plan by December 31st, 2021, and a program and service inventory by February 28th, 2022, to be reviewed by the board in advance of the timelines presented, and that staff commence discussions with municipalities for the development of agreements for the provision of programs and services as identified in the regulations. So that's the recommended resolution. What is the board's wish? Anybody want to move that as printed? Director Dunn, seconded by Director Windover. Any final comments or questions on that info? Anyone opposed to that resolution? Okay, we'll consider that passed. Thank you, Mark. 8.2 is administrative bylaw update. I think we can probably give you a bit of a break on this one. I don't know if you want to give us a 20-second overview. We've already talked about most of this, and yep. I think this is just the bylaw coming forward, but go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So yeah, 20-second update is the bylaw. As I mentioned, Conservation Ontario approved some changes to the bylaw. We use that as a general guide for our bylaw, which is, so we translate the information into our sections because it's a little bit different, but it's essentially trying to address all the pieces that are have changed since our last update in January, which address municipal appointments, agreements, agricultural appointees, the process of approving agenda and minutes, and chair and vice chair terms. Some changes to powers of authorities as written in the Act, and some additional detail added for the audit component and making sure it's a qualified professional looking at kind of generally accepted accounting principles. So those are the changes. Detail them in the chart, and then there's track changes in the bylaw itself, just for ease of translation.
Got it. Thank you. Any questions on that bylaw amendments? Okay, motion that we're looking for, the amendments to the administrative and meeting procedural bylaw number 1 to reflect governance procedures and legislative updates be approved and adopted for use immediately. Moved by Director Hooper, seconded by Director Rock. Any final comments or questions? Anyone opposed to that motion? That's passed. Thank you. 8.3 is the 2022 preliminary budget. I know we've already been over most of this, but I think we're in the next step of the process. So Mark, Wanda, go ahead.
Yep. What I'll do, thank you, Mr. Chair, is I'll introduce the budget, and then I'll let Wanda take over. Her capable hand, she knows the budget inside out. So I will just start out. We took the direction from the board at the last meeting. So we've looked at the 2.5%, results in overall increase of just over $40,000. And so we've taken that. Wanda's done her magic on the budget, and what we anticipate doing is following this meeting and any adjustments that we might need to make, moving it forward to November, adding the text part to the budget, and if board's in agreement, having that circulated to municipalities over the Christmas break with a little bit extra time, because we don't count Christmas break internally anyway as part of that consultation period. Give enough time to for municipalities to look at it and then approve it early in the year next year. So that is what we're planning on. We're generally, I think we're inside the budget guidelines for those that have provided us the budgets. So that is the overview, and I'll turn it over to Wanda.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll take that 20 seconds that Mark had and pull this together for everybody. I'll just go quickly through the backgrounder, highlight a few things. In 2022, we're anticipating, because our workforce worked remotely most of the last year and a half, we've already invested in infrastructure, critical infrastructure, computers, digitization of records, that type of thing. And so we'll be providing our staff with a hybrid model for working from remotely in 2022. So how that fits into the budget is that it may indeed have an impact on our overhead costs and reducing our overhead costs, as well as our infrastructure maintenance. So that's one of those areas that we don't know what that will fall out to be. But we've also maintained our FTEs at the level that we established in 2021, which is 24 permanent positions. We've included reasonable salary adjustment for 2022, given the impact of the most current economic situation, along with the projected inflation rates. What I did was took the CPI year over year, August to August, and came up with a reasonable number. So as well, employment grants resurfaced in 2021, and we accessed a number of those. They seem to be also focusing the environmental industry, which is really to our benefit. And we just applied for and have approval for a position in communications from Eco-Canada. So that's going to assist us in the workload that is in that area, meeting all the different strategic goals that are coming up. So as far as revenue goes, planning and permitting says that it's favorable that the volume of permits and applications that are coming down the pipe, that it'll stay at the same or slightly higher level in 2022. We're estimating about $27,000 increase in revenues. And then the Halliburton County Floodplain Mapping Project will also continue in 22, which adds a $50,000 revenue to that department area. Under IWM, we're going to continue the Innovation Hub. They generate some revenue. The net profit of that would be about $6,000. And we've also projected that the provincial grant at $24,000 will stay stabilized as well. Stewardship and conservation lands, well, it's the restoration aspect of stewardship, has developed some projects, and they value at $81,000. As well, the region of Durham, within that department area, supports the Durham East Cross Forest. And they're supporting that at $106,000 in 2022. And we're using also $16,000 from that department area's budget that's been deferred in the past. So well, that's how that's being funded in 22. Operating expenses overall, they're pretty level. You know, they have small increases between 0.9% to just slightly over 1% overall within the department. Corporate services appears to be the outlier in 22. That would be because of the program, the communications position that will cost money, but it's offset with a grant of $43,000. So IWM and Stewardship are managing their budgets within the same targets. What I did provide was the municipal operating levy, in a table, and to demonstrate the increases. Director Moore, my apologies, there's been a typo error there. 2.69 is really 2.49 for you. Under general projects, we're continuing with the two that have we've carried forward for 3 years now. We are going to continue to digitize. We have massive quantities of records right from the beginning of time, right from 1979. And so those, you know, we're making a dent in that, and any deferred revenue from that project will be applied in 2022. With the tracking aspect of our website, we ran into a couple of obstacles. Our plate was pretty full in our department area with the strategic plan, and because the quotes that we got for implementing that exceeded the budget. So what we'll do is we'll take the money from the 21 budget we raised, add it on the 22 budget, and get that done. So I provided there a table. We lost the title somewhere in transition. 21's numbers and 22's numbers are compared there for you. Under special benefiting projects, the region of Durham continues with implementation, and the cost of that program area is $164,000. Municipal support is $142,000, and the watershed plan is in its final year for funding at $28,600. For the Durham members, what I did was I stayed within guidelines from past years that have been pretty consistent the last 4 or 5 years of what they will fund. I haven't actually received any guidelines at this time yet.
Ms. Stephen, I wondered if you could share your screen with us, please.
I don't know how. I do not have any graphics like the rest do.
Okay. All right.
So this is page, it's around 320. 320 in your agenda package.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. I'm actually running off of 2 computers because I burned out the camera on my company computer. So I'm loaded up on one computer, my personal computer, and I'm working off of the company one. I apologize for that. The City of Kawartha Lakes has had a presentation from Mark at Council. The total cost of the implementation programs were $454,800. It's a combination again of past deliverables that have been delayed and the 22 objectives. Deferred revenue will be used, partially fund that for the deliverables that have not been completed. And then there's a levy of $279,000. In alignment with the previous lake management plans for the city, there's a 4-year project which was approved in 2021. And the funding for that in 2022 is $74,000. And it follows with an average of about $70,000 for the following years. With the City of Kawartha Lakes and the region of Durham, there is a joint project following in the stewardship area in the implementation of their programs for lake management. And through that program area, they're both working towards the same objectives. It's the same strategy, the same goals and targets. So that with combining the municipal partners to reach the objectives, the project is $144,000. The regions has a special climate change fund, which they'll be using $18,000 to support, and a levy request of $19,000 is being funded from the region's deferred revenue. The City of Kawartha Lakes has a levy of $37,000, which aligns with their goals of their lake management plan. By working together, the project will leverage $36,000 in grants and about $33,000 in products, trees, plants, and that sort of thing. So there's a chart there, a small chart there for the City of Kawartha Lakes and the region of Durham to see. In the summary of the 2020 levy, I've listed each municipality with their operating grant or their operating levy for 2022, the general project levy, the 2022 special projects, and the total for 2022. I compared that with the 2021 approved levy and provided you with a levy increase or decrease. Looks like it's all increase. But one area I have to identify here for the City of Kawartha Lakes is that the municipal levy for 21 is misstated. It's at a $1,291,000. I neglected to add $90,000 because I dragged that number from the circulated document, and the $90,000 for the Lake Rimple project was approved after that. So this number, if I increased it to the $90,000 with the $90,000, it would be $1,381,000. And I know that Mark gave a presentation saying that the City of Kawartha Lakes would be $11,859. And when I take into account the RMO, then that's exactly the right number. I've had to say that out loud. Mark was right. His numbers are right. So there we go. That was my punishment. So the region of Durham has an increase overall of $23,000. Municipality of Trent Lakes has an increase of $1,719. Gavin Monaghan has an increase of $146. The next steps is to create, we have some small modifications like bringing forward that new number for the City of Kawartha Lakes comparative. The next steps would be to create that bigger document that provides all the information related to the projects and related to what we intend to accomplish in 21, what we did accomplish in 21, what we will accomplish in 22. And then that will come forward to the board November 25th. And you, if you like it, you would approve it for circulation for 30 days. And that would take us, after comments from municipalities, it would take us to the weighted vote. That's it. It was 20 seconds, wasn't it?
Yeah, roughly. So could you just say that last part again, Wanda? Just, I know the motion. The motion is that it be brought back to November 25th, but I guess I'm questioning if there's no issues with the board in this budget, can we not approve the draft today for circulation to the, why does it have to come back to November? Just go over that part again.
So it's been the tradition to bring it back one last time in case the board wanted to make any further changes. There's no changes to the levy. There'll be some restatement of numbers. There won't be any changes to any of the levy amounts. And then we put the bigger document with all the different pages. And sometimes it's been as much as 100 pages. We've sliced it down to maybe 40 pages. It's just a descriptor. All the different pages that we add are a descriptor of what we do, what the money is going to be used for. And then the board approves that for circulation. So it's the choice of the board. If you would like us to put that document together and move it forward to the municipalities for comment, we'd be pleased to do that as well.
Okay, thank you. Just curious, the two options. Councillor Dunn, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question through you to the to Wanda. How many times has that actually ever happened? Where you presented the draft for presentation? I know we've had discussions before we approve the draft, but once we approve the draft for distribution, I can't recall any time that I've been on the board where we said, well, we want to change this part of it. Our discussion has always been right now at this stage. So I tend to agree with the chair that if the board is in agreement, it just takes out one more step, that's all. And then we get our feedback from our municipalities, and then we can have a discussion at the board level with the weighted vote. Just saves a step, saves time.
Mr. Chair, Dr. Dunn, it is an extra step, and it's been at the request of the board to see it one more time in the past, but I would never be so bold as to change the numbers before they go out. I mean, I just wouldn't do that. But yes, I will restate them if I know a grant has come in or something, that a more specific number. But yes, you have all the right to have a look at it one more time before you do the weighted vote. I'm not, we haven't changed anything in a document that gets to the next stage of any significance in a long time.
No, fair enough. I know it's tradition, and I'm not a huge fan of tradition. I'm more about efficiency, but I certainly won't speak for the rest of the board. If they're more comfortable seeing it one more time, then I respect that. So I'll put it out to the board. What do you want to do? We can either budget proceed as provided, and the information for municipal partners be developed for approval to circulate to the member municipalities at the November 25th Board of Directors meeting, or the draft budget proceed as provided and the information for municipal partners for approval to circulate to the member municipalities. I guess we can eliminate that step if we're comfortable with the budget as is. But any questions on the budget first, and then maybe I'll come back to you, Councillor Dunn. Councillor Hooper, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Make sure my mic's on. Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Wanda, for your presentation. Just a couple of, I think you did explain it. On my page 319, where it talks about we're maintaining our current capacity at the current level of full-time employees. How many normally is it 24, or was it 24 that we had? Yes. Sorry. Is that a normal complement of employees that we normally have for full-time? Or is it?
Yeah, we've reestablished that. You, Mr. Chair, we're back at that quantity of human resource capacity that we need to adequately operate on for the size of organization. We had lost some FTEs previously through budget cuts, and they've gradually been replaced.
Okay, and where you talked about the employment grants have served service in 2021, and we found a number of grants. So that paragraph there, does that tie in with the corporate services, where it says corporate services includes a contract position of $53,800? Is that what you're talking about there in regards to that grant?
Mr. Chair, yes, Director Hooper, it's exactly what I'm talking about. So yeah, corporate services is a bit of an outlier in an increase. The other departments are between $10,000 and $11,000, and my corporate services department jumps 51. But when you counter that with the grant of 43, I'm right in the same ballpark as all the other departments.
Perfect, thank you. And one final thing, I think you cut out when you talked about the 90,000. What did you say that was? I'm sorry.
Oh, sure, that's no problem. The very last chart, which is a summary of levy for each municipality. In the 2021 approved levy column, for the city of Kawartha Lakes, it is stated as $1,291,700.
Right.
And that was the circulated amount, and it did not include the special benefiting project the city of Kawartha Lakes wanted for Lake Dalrymple, and so that number is understated by $90,000. Because indeed it was improved for 2021.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Ms. Stevens, for your presentation.
Oh,
Thank
my
you.
pleasure.
So we don't owe you another 90,000, right?
Oh, well, I can
Well,
put the to it.
yeah. No, we're good. Thanks. Any other questions? Any further questions on the budget or the process? Director Smith, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Just one question out of the numbers from page 325 of the draft budget. Maybe you could shed some light on this in terms of the expenditures on the vehicle pool. The budget for 2021 is $25,000, and you've got it bracketed, which I assume means it wasn't used, or I just need clarification on those two $25,000 figures there, if we could, please.
Right. So the way we treat our vehicle pool is the vehicles aren't assigned to a specific department. We treat it like a rental company. So we rent the vehicles because it's the only fair way to do it when we have projects in different departments. And so we manage the vehicles as a pool, and they all go into the pool, and all their expenses, including insurance and repairs and tires, all that stuff is charged to the pool. And then what we do is we have a rental rate. When you use it for a day, it's $64 for one of the cars. So your department gets charged for that car for the day. And now we definitely have departmentalized it or project or put it to a project. When the project uses our cars, they pay the same rate as the department. So what we're trying to do is earn a profit on the usage of the vehicles adequately to cover depreciation. And when we do have a surplus, and that's what I'm identifying there, the pool isn't going to be an expense this year. The pool is going to create a small profit of $25,000. And that's how we replace our cars, because the cars, the surplus goes to the reserve for asset acquisition. And in 2020, the actual number, we had a loss of it cost us $367 in one of those columns there, because the cars just sat there. So it still cost us insurance. They still had to have repairs. But we didn't charge them to any of the departments or to any of the projects. So when it's a bucket, it means it's not going to cost us. It's a profit within the expense account. Recovery. Did I do okay?
All right, thank you. So
it's a fleet reserve, building up a fleet reserve, right? And to try to cover the future capital costs of the vehicles. So.
Right, that was where I was going from, because I know that in the past we've had our fleet has been aging, and there was concerns about replacements, but everything is working out that way is my main concern.
Correct.
Good.
It's working out. And the December 31st, 2020, we invested some money in asset acquisition reserve that was surplus from that year, from managing through a pandemic. We had saved some money. We've added to that reserve in 2024 use, and most likely in 22 to replace most of those vehicles. Some of them are 2012. So I think it's time.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on the budget, concerns, comments? Okay, Director Dunn, did you want to propose something?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll give you a motion that the draft budget be received and approved for distribution to the municipalities for their comments.
Okay, thank you. Anyone want to second that? Director Windover, thank you. Concerns? Go ahead.
It's a good budget, Mr. Chair. Anything I've ever found irksome has long since been removed. And it's a good, solid operating and moving forward budget, and I fully support it.
Thank you. Director Windover, any comments on that? They seconded it? You're on mute, sir.
No, I am, yeah, okay. No, I think it's very good. No. Maybe you're right.
Thank you. Any other concerns, comments? Director Hooper, go ahead.
Just looking to the future. There we go. Hit the wrong button. Has any thought been given? I know Director Smith spoke about the vehicle pool. Has any thought been given? We are a conservation area authority to electric vehicles somewhere down the road.
Oh,
Is that question to me?
Sorry, through you to Wanda, Ms. Stevens. Sorry.
Okay, through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we've been price prohibitive for a small conservation authority like us, but as climate change progression has happened through provincial and federal directives, it becomes more persuasive for us to be leaders in that area.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. And I agree with my other colleagues too. Regards great budget, a lot of work went into it, and thank you very much for the presentation.
Agree, yeah, and you know what, great discussion for a future meeting, just to talk about a transition over, in that, whether we can marry up with some other fleet or something, City of Kawartha Lakes or one of the other municipalities, there might be a way to do that more cost effectively, but certainly something that needs to be talked about. Thank you. Any other comments on the budget? Final comments? We're gonna approve it for circulation is the motion. Anyone opposed to that motion? Excellent. Great job. That's passed. Thank you. Thanks, Wanda. Thanks, Mark, for putting that together, and good stuff. We won't bother you next month with it. So you're off and running. Okay, item 9 is new business. Is there any, I don't have any new business. Anything anybody wants to bring up? Nope. Reports and updates from board members. Does anybody have anything they want to share? Nope. Closed session, we have none, and I'm just looking, item 12, a motion. Our next meeting is November 25th, and I'm just looking at a motion to adjourn. I will get that from Director Rock, second by Director Windover. Anyone opposed to adjourning? Didn't think so. We are adjourned. Have a great day. Thanks, everyone.